you have it muted?
1, 2. Okay, welcome everybody to Video and Collaboration Session Part 2. Here we will listen to 3 speakers talking about their experiences in video and collaborations. First out will be Tim Boundy from Janet. Janet has been working quite extensively with video conferencing over a number of years, and Tim has been involved in this work for the last couple of years.
Me or
Yeah.
Janet?
You.
Me, I've worked for Janet for 8 years.
8 years.
Yeah.
So, over to you.
Okay, thank you. Right, hi everybody. It's good to be here again. Oh, and I should probably say hello to my girlfriend who's just realised she can watch me on a live stream, which is great news. I'm here to talk about the new Janet video conferencing service. You might know that Janet's had a video conferencing service which involves a centralized infrastructure, so MCUs and gateways, and an operations control center, so a telephone support line for people to call, and also an online booking service. And we've had something along those lines for the last 19 years. And it's been evolving slowly, rather organically, so what we've got now is bit by bit, come on in, bit by bit, the evolution of 19 years worth of work. And it's creaking at the seams, so we've introduced a new system. This is called vScene, and that's what I've been working on for the last year or so, and what I'm here to tell you about. The title, Video Conferencing Without the Worry, I wrote that about 4, 5, 6 months ago. I can't remember when I applied to speak at this conference. And I'd like to say most of the users, that's true. For me, definitely not. This is a story of the pain and terror and anguish of launching a new software system, which if any of you have ever done it, you'll know exactly what it's like. Right now, you can maybe tell from the slight grey bits in my beard, we're 1 month after launch, which when you think you've spotted all of the bugs you could ever find, then several thousand people land on your website and tell you there's a lot more you didn't find. So that's what we're going through at the moment. But I am genuinely pleased with how it's turned out, so I'll try and explain the new service to you. This is also an unashamed plug for the service, because we are offering this to other NRENs. So this service is going to be available to be multi-tenanted, and we've already got 1 NREN signed up to use it, and we'd like to invite more NRENs if you'd like to have a booking scheduling system for your video conference service. So a little bit of background. We first introduced our service, which has until now been called JVCS, in '95. At the time, it was ISDN only, and we introduced a booking system then. And I'm sure many of you will ask, why do you need a booking system for a video conferencing service nowadays? This is historical reasons. We introduced it back then because it was a limited number of ISDN lines that we could offer, so we had to schedule the use. And that model has continued. The point is to deliver educational content over video, and that is the primary use of the service. So this is normally used by lecturers, either linking lecture theatres together and expanding obviously the audience for one lecture, or by lecturers at home linking to school classrooms, or often by large research projects linking lots of groups together as well. So education and research are the primary users. We've also got quite a long list of cultural content providers, such as museums, galleries, the National Archives, science centres, who use this to conference to schools. And that actually is my history. I used to be Commander Tim at the National Space Centre and dress up as an astronaut every day. It was brilliant. That's how I got into video conferencing. But that was a long time ago. Now I've got a real job. So that's how it was until July this year. And at that point, we had, using the service, we had about 8,000 video systems. We actually trimmed that down. So I think Jan said in a talk yesterday that we had 9,000. We trimmed that down to 8,000. Almost 10,000 users, 1,000 organizations, which are schools, colleges, HE, and research. And we were running about 50,000 conferences a year via the system. And then, after that, we launched vScene, and these numbers fell. And I'll explain why in a bit. So the old video conferencing system, one of the pages looked a bit like this. So although we'd added some color, it was still rather a basic text entry page, much like a form. And you could fill in your details and click go. And that's what, I'm not saying we've moved away from that, but the whole website was very much text-based and rather simple. It was 80,000 lines of C, and only one guy in the world knew how to work it. So you can see we were at severe danger there of this guy either retiring or getting hit by a bus or something worse, and we knew we needed to do something about this. So change was required, primarily to address the customer requirements who kept asking us, why is your website so old, basically? It doesn't seem to do, where's the Facebook button and all the new things that you get on websites these days? And it was noticeable. But we also needed to review the whole service because the operational model involved a team of people up in Scotland who were running the service and answering the phones. They were great, well, we all expected. The financial model was free to all of the UK institutions, which was a great model, very simple, and we were charging some of the commercial and content providers to use the service. And the technical solution was based on Cisco hardware, which is very expensive, as you know. So we needed to change a lot of these things, but the main point was we had a single point of failure for the website, and it was very expensive to develop. So we had to think up, how would you design a booking and scheduling video conferencing system if you're starting from scratch? What do our users want? How do they think of video conferencing? What do they do? What do they imagine they're doing when they arrange a video conference? Because there's lots of different concepts. So I'll try and go through a few of these, and you'll probably be able to imagine the video conferencing systems that you've used that might fit into one or more of these plans. Now, what I've tried to do, stupidly, is create one system that does it all. And I've yet to be told whether I've succeeded or not, but what we've tried to do is fit as many models into our system as possible without making it too confusing. And you can see if you can spot them when I take you around it. But you can imagine the different opposing concepts of video conferencing. So you've either got, are you calling a person? If you're a person, so this is Skype, for example. On Skype, you call a person, and it's the person's system that rings. On our previous system, our booking system, you were arranging something between one bit of hardware and another bit of hardware. And those two bits of hardware, those video systems, would be called. So you are actually, when you're making the booking, you're typing in the name of a piece of hardware, not the name of a person. But nowadays, people are expecting to have personal contact and to arrange a meeting with a person. And they don't care what bit of hardware they're using. So there's two opposing concepts there. The other one, I'm not sure why this keeps flicking back. I didn't realize it would slide up every time. On demand versus scheduled or booked. Mostly nowadays, you expect your video conferencing system to just start when you want it. You shouldn't have to book anything. You should have enough resource to be able to cope with demand whenever it's required. However, and that's what we're aiming at. However, a lot of our customer base is now really used to booking things. They like booking all of their lessons a year in advance. They really like the idea that they can book it 1 week, and they walk into the room and sit down, and at exactly 10 o'clock on Tuesday, their video conferencing system springs into life, and they're connected to the call without them doing anything at that moment. Which also means they can send a complete novice teacher who doesn't know anything about video conferencing, they can send them into the classroom and just say, sit there, it'll work. So a lot of people really like the booking idea, so we couldn't throw that away. Are you referencing a shared physical room, which is a video conferencing room, and is this the name of the room you were calling, or is it a personal endpoint? So when you're listing these pieces of hardware on your system, does this refer to a physical space or the actual codec itself? And you have to be consistent about that. Otherwise people will get very confused what they're calling. And if you have two different codecs in the same room, that gets very confusing. So previously we've labeled our things after shared physical rooms. But nowadays, people have got more common personal endpoints, and they want to be able to receive calls on that. So there's also a mixed concept there. Lastly, there's a new concept of a virtual room, or it's not a new one, but a lot of people now expect that when they arrange a conference, they are meeting at a place, and that all the people that they think are going to join this meeting are going to connect to them at this virtual location that they've arranged. So that's one concept. The other concept, you are when you make a booking or bring a conference, that you're temporarily brought together and you see each other, and it's not in a space. It's like having a phone call. You don't imagine your phone call as happening anywhere. You imagine you're just talking to another person. So there's these two different concepts here, and if you A lot of people like the idea of a virtual room because they're used to thinking of a meeting space where everyone dials into that's permanently there, or at least semi-permanently there, that they can give the address of to somebody, and that person can call in. So we've tried to address all of these issues. We've got a lot of feedback from this. A lot of people are coming to us on our current video service, having used lots of other things, lots of other concepts, and don't understand what's going on ours because they used to be able to call a person, or they're coming to our old booking service and saying, how do I get a room? What do you mean by a room? There's lots of different meanings for this. So there's been a lot of misunderstanding. So there's the user concept of what they think a conference is. There's a user concept of what they think they are calling. Are they calling somebody, something, or a virtual space? And then there's the terminology that you have to attach to your system to make this make sense to everybody who uses it. So when you try and launch something, are you joining, calling, dialing, booking, scheduling? All these different words can mean exactly the same thing technically, but to a user it's a completely different concept, and it can throw them off if you use the wrong word. So all of these concepts influence the expected result to the user, and all of these concepts influence the design of our service. And we get questions like this, which really highlights the difference here. Somebody's filled in a form, they've gone that person, and there's a button at the bottom that says start. And they're so used to having a pre-booked conference that they did not want to click the start button because they didn't know what it would do. If you filled in a form and gone that person, start, most people go start, it's going to start the conference, isn't it? But they were a bit nervous about this, so they didn't want to click it. So it's very difficult to do this. So what we've got, the headlines, conference with people first. We've decided that this should be more people orientated now. More systems out there are about personal calling people. But we haven't abandoned the idea of being able to call a hardware system if that's what you'd rather do. We've tried to be a more friendly, cleaner interface that guesses what you're doing and understands your favorites and uses a few of the modern user interface tools and tricks to make people feel more comfortable. We've got more focus on immediately being able to launch a conference. So by default, this assumes you want the conference right now, because again, that is how most systems work. But there is a schedule button, so people can still use the booking thing. We've got a new browser-based video web client. I'll show you that in a second. We've introduced the meeting room concept. It was just so popular and so many systems use it that we couldn't ignore this any longer. We shouldn't ignore it. And mainly because our CEO kept nagging me that he wanted a number that somebody could call. He doesn't have a dial-in number on his hardware system, but he wanted a number that he could put on his business cards that where people could call and know that they'd be able to call him. So he wanted a number. So he's ended up with a meeting room to satisfy that. We've also got increased streaming capacity and future development focus on interoperation with other services. Hardware has changed too. We are gradually moving across from Cisco to video for a number of reasons, which I'm sure if any of you have any experience with Cisco hardware, you will understand. Cost. You get a lot more for your money when you're using video stuff. You've still got to pay the maintenance charges, which are similar prices, but Cisco is, to buy very expensive hardware is expensive. Video is more flexible, it's more scalable more easily, and also it gives us cloud expansion options for what we use the video for. And to be honest, and I think I can just say this publicly now, we got a bit tired of Cisco surprising us with licenses. The latest version of this was when they decided to upgrade the MCU software and turn your it was basically a renaming, but they tried to turn our MCUs into telepresence MCUs and told us that it would be completely free. And then when we actually got round to it, the completely free upgrade was free, but however, the additional licenses we needed to make all the things happen that we used to be able to do were not free. So we decided we needed to move on and try out other technical solutions. I'm not saying video is perfect in any way. It definitely has its limitations. But it does give us more flexibility for the time. So we are using video now for desktop client. I think the microphone keeps dropping out, but I'll carry on. The desktop client, browser-based one, Flash. We're also using video replay for streaming and recording, and also the video gateways for meeting rooms. I'll get to the demo in a second, but the desktop client, which we used to use on the Cisco MCUs, we used to use the solution called Conference Me, which was quite a few years old. Cisco decided to discontinue this, so we were forced to move away. The new one, which is Video Web, now enables us to also have a desktop client that we can offer for Mac and Linux. It launches in your browser. It does need a minor plugin, so we're looking forward to WebEx as well. But the plugin, the browser plugin, often doesn't need admin rights unless they've set up their Windows firewall, which might need admin rights to allow another application to use it. The desktop is using a scalable video codec, so it's a bit more graceful when you've got changes in bandwidth. You get a smoother experience. Desktop client goes up to HD, which is quite good, and it also enables us to brand it, which is one of the themes of the website. So if I, live demo. You all sound very excited about this. Peter's actually now looking really tense. I'll show you the service and try and do your demo of this. And I shouldn't have. Oh yeah, that's all right. And the browser. Okay, so I'll just log out again, then you can see. Now this, I should probably say that. Oh, and I've gone and expanded the text, so some of the buttons have been a bit warped. We are suffering from the moment from a rather schizophrenic branding problem with Janet, in that I still work for a company called Janet, but now that's owned by JISC, and JISC are very keen to have the brand of Janet as just referring to the network, so therefore this service is a JISC service, but it still refers to Janet all the way through it at the moment. So you'll probably notice a rather strange mixture of Janet and JISC as we go through. Hopefully I'm going to get some clear instructions on that soon, and we can make it all look much nicer. So login, you can see we've got institutional login there. So everything I'm going to describe is what's working for Janet, but this can also be offered to any NREN, and I'm going to point at Kevin over here from HEANet, who HEANet are the first other NREN to use this. We've also had a few inquiries from other NRENs, so there, but I won't mention them by name yet. But we can add your own federated access service and give you your own little button there, so you can use your own service to log in as well if you like. We've avoided using EduGain so far, but I won't go into that too much detail. So if I log in, now, front page. So this is supposed to allow you to access as much as you can and see what's going on. I've got rather a busy front page because I'm an administrator, so I can see a lot of stuff. But you've basically got the list of upcoming conferences here. So you can see there's quite a lot, and obviously there's lots of pages of mine, but most people would probably only have a few. So upcoming conferences there, the meeting rooms that I've used here, top 5 contacted users, and top 5 VC systems. So already we're addressing the problem of I want to call Emma. So if you've got a person you want to call, we've literally got this down now to 2 clicks. You click on the little camera here next to Emma. It takes you into the booking and scheduling page, but it's all pre-populated. So I could, unfortunately Emma sits next to me at work, therefore we've got the same video system. I could click Start Now, and that would be 2 clicks just to launch a conference with somebody. So what this is the scheduling page. So if I go back to the home page here, you can launch that from a number of different ways. If I'd clicked on top 5 VC systems, the camera, it would have launched the same page, but with the video conferencing system by default used. So you can just say, I want that thing I do where I call that room, if that's how you imagine the concept of video conferencing to call a hardware system. You can do that and then fill in the person's name afterwards. So you can approach it from both directions. Let me show you how to make a call then. Let's call Alan. So it's pre-populated the form here. We can give it a name. So it's got me as a registered user there, and it's got Alan down here. Now, because I've typed my name in here, it's automatically filled in this box with my default video conference system. And that's called development@ja.net. So all the systems, no matter what they are, have the same format of name. Now you can see I've got one here, Tim VisiMeetRoom@ja.net. So that, if I choose that instead, that's now, instead of calling the hardware system that was development@ja.net, it's going to send me a URL to allow me to launch VisiMeet, which is a software client, on my laptop. So when you register a hardware system, I'll just show you this, you can choose what type of system you're registering. Ooh, let me just put Joanna's in there. So, so VC system type. So we tried to make this possible for the person who doesn't know anything about video conferencing. They just know that there's a video conferencing system thingy here, or they've got something on their laptop that's supposed to be able to do a video conference, and they know that vScene will make it happen. So they've got, what is it? Is it hardware or software? Is it unknown? Or I can use the free desktop. Ooh, okay, let's choose hardware for now. What type of connection does it have? Unknown again. So they can click unknown at every step, and it'll give them a default IP system. Or if they know they've got an IP system or an ISDN one or a SIP one, they can choose that. Software, we try to pick brands they might recognize. So, oh, you can't scroll down. There we go. So a lot of people will recognize these names, and if you click the names, we know what that system needs to be able to dial in or out. We know if it uses SIP, and that means it changes so if you click video, it doesn't ask you for any more information because we can just send a URL out. If you click Movi, it knows you want an E164 number. So we've tried to avoid asking people unnecessary questions, which is always where people got confused. So that's where you've created your own video systems. And if you look at my video systems that are registered here, come on. Ooh. Are we still online? 5 minutes. Okay, I'll get on with it. Let's go back and go back to this conference page. I'll show you the major features. Okay. Everything seems to have slowed down a bit. I think that's just because you told me I had 5 minutes left, so everything's decided to go slower. Is anyone else having connection problems? Or is it just me? Okay, well I'll talk you through what would happen. You can imagine the two boxes with the name and the hardware system. I can choose on the right hand side. Oh, right, okay. I can choose on the right hand side the hardware system. So Alan, for example, that's his default one. He chose that, so he knows if anyone books a system with him, that's the option they'll be told is his favorite one. But of course, he works in a building where there's lots of video systems, so all his options are listed here, including systems that have been registered by other people, so they're probably in someone else's office, but this one here is a meeting room down the hall. I've got a choice of all the meeting rooms that are in Lumen House, which is where my office is. So you can see we're trying to guide people towards choosing the video system that's right for that person. So if I start adding some of my other colleagues, it'll guess their name. Oh, Mark O'Leary has a hyphen. There he is. And it's added his favorite. So you could just go down the list and type people's names and then click Start at the bottom. If you want to schedule it, you click this. It gives you the time boxes. Other options, any conference can be streamed, recorded. You can select other people to be managers if you've got admin people. So you can see you'd build your conference like that, maybe even set it to recur, happen every week at Tuesday if you've got a regular lesson, and then book it. That then stored in our system, and we then tell the MCU to dial out to all these people by default at that exact time, if you didn't click just launch now. The meeting room concept, I'll move on from the booking. So that's the way most of these things are used. And that was the old concept. People objected a lot if we changed that. So we've still got the concept of scheduling a meeting. But we've introduced meeting rooms. So if I go to the list of the meeting rooms that I've got access to here, you see it lists my favorites and then the other ones that I can manage. Now, I've asked one of my colleagues to join me in a meeting room. So if I click the little camera here to join the meeting room, it'll give me two options. Do I want to enter using the vScene desktop client? Or do I want to use a hardware system, which of course it's put my default in for, but I could choose any hardware system that it would connect into the meeting room. So I'm going to use the desktop client, and hopefully we're going to meet Paul Bonnet, who is the service technical coordinator. Hello, Paul. Oh. Now, this is a perfect use case because Paul is at home because he's broken his leg. Oh, it's good to see you've got a much smaller bandage on your ankle, on your wrist, though. The boots. Oh, right. That's quite impressive. Robocop. You're using the desktop client from your laptop, and you can see I can expand this, and it becomes, and I can also reduce the size of my contribution, so you get a pretty good picture on your desktop using a free desktop client, even if it's of Paul in his lounge. So this is now freely available to anyone. We haven't limited the use of this desktop client. You get a nice smooth picture, and you can share your desktop, and then you can choose different camera and microphone settings if you want to. So it's pretty flexible. But the meeting room itself. So thank you, Paul. Thank you very much for your. I didn't need you to do anything other than move around there, but it was very useful. Thanks. Okay, go on, limp around your lounge for the rest of the day. So the meeting room itself, if I go to My Rooms and click on the detail of it, you can see it's got a GDS number, an IP address, a SIP address, and then you can email a link for someone to join by the desktop as well. So any user can create their own meeting room, which means everybody now has got their own personal space with their own fixed number that never changes, which is what our CEO wanted. So they can hand this out and meet people in this room using whatever technology that person wants or whatever technology they want. So this is a biggest change. This is allowing people to have open or private meeting rooms has meant that we've kept with the original concept of booking, which isn't really necessary, but people like to book, and gone to the more up-to-date concept of completely ad hoc, having meetings whenever you like. So I'll quickly flick back to the presentation. If I can get out of that and just do 2 more slides. Victor? Volta, sorry. And then, now as I said, this service, we've designed the interface. Let me flick through these in case the network went down and I couldn't show you the live site. Designed the interface to have a new tariff structure. Education and research in the UK is still centrally funded. Public services, which is museums, local authorities, we're giving them at a really reduced rate. And then we have a new commercial tariff, because we think this is very relevant to the commercial services that want to work with education and research. And then we have an international education and research for NRENs as well. So the idea is that we can offer this service to other NRENs, and we have had quite a bit of interest. The tariff uses the same calculations as the giant cost-sharing model, so it's pretty open as to how we work that out to generate a starting price. But then additional services can also be bolted onto this. So if you have your own hardware already, Cisco or Video, we can manage that for you, or some of it if you want. You can migrate all of your users into it. You can have it translate into your own language and apply your own look and feel interface so it looks however you want. Because it's multi-tenanted, you'd become your own super organization, so you could have it as a completely standalone thing where you can only see your own people, or you can share your information with all of the other organizations on there and see all of the users from Janet and all of the other NRENs. So it's quite flexible that way. So this also means that we can manage whether you're using our MCUs or someone else's MCUs or a mixture of both. So we've kept it pretty flexible there. Hours of service, if you're interested in this kind of thing, for the operations center. And that's my last slide. So I think I've got a couple of minutes for questions. 1 minute for questions, right? I've run right to the end here. I hope you found that interesting. We're, as I said, 1 month in, so there's quite a few bugs still that I'm being harassed about. But so far, I'm quite pleased with it. So any questions from anybody? Okay, looks like I've got a... Oh, right, Jan?
Practical question. You said that you didn't look into hooking this into Edugain yet, but I assume that logon and user handling is all federated?
Yes. So, but it's federated per federation. So we haven't...
Yeah.
So rather than joining up with Edugain listing all of the federations, we are just going to apply a new button for a new federation because we imagine that the NREN that wants to use the service will rebrand their own page anyway. So rather than adding the Edugain button to that page, they can just add their own federation logo and look and feel. So it takes a step out. Any other questions? Yeah. pricing model for scientific organizations. They would come under research, I guess, assuming that they're doing public research. Then they are, at the moment in the UK, they are funded already by the government. So that's at no charge. If they're a commercial organization, then yeah, we have a commercial tariff for that. But it's aimed at the minimum side of competitive, so that we don't fall under the I can't remember what the laws are called, where you offer a service with public money. You probably know what I mean. But yeah, so it's quite competitive pricing. Any other questions? I think. Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Tim. Okay, so the next speaker will be Jan Meyer from Uninet, and it will be a little bit different twist with regards to this setup that we have seen from Janet's, which is, if you might call it, traditional video conferencing and the service and the scheduling booking system. Jan Meyer will talk about WebRTC, that has the potential of revolutionizing or changing the way that we see and use video conferencing systems, where we can get a video conferencing system directly into the browser. I'm still looking forward to see how you would schedule meetings and so forth with WebRTC, but I'm sure that we will get answers to some of that from John. So,
or you might not. So I was supposed to do a talk about proposing a WebRTC roadmap. So this should serve as a warning to all of you. It's harder than you might think. So we got less done in 6 months than we had hoped. We did, however, have a workshop on WebRTC yesterday, and quite a bit of things actually became a lot clearer on the way forward. So I'm going to walk you through what WebRTC is, why it is important, and what we propose to do in order to find some answers. So I work for Uninet, work in a program called the eCampus program, which is a national effort to build and deploy national infrastructure for e-learning and the competence to use it. So this is very much taking technology, removing barriers, putting it into specifically a pedagogical context, and making sure that everyone has the tools to be able to use that infrastructure. 3 main pillars that we work on: digital exams, lecture recording, and collaboration solutions. And the latter is my attention area. So what does Norway look like at the moment from a real-time communication point of view? We have the national SIP infrastructure. Most of our institutions have moved on to Microsoft Link or are in the process of doing so. Based on that consensus that has finally emerged after some 3-4 years of discussions, it suddenly made a lot of sense to start working on a shared Microsoft Link infrastructure, which is what my colleague Hova over there is now working on, and which we hope will go live from summer next year. That's when the next big Link upgrade comes. We have the MCU stuff. We do have a shared Adobe Connect service. We have the telephony framework agreement, audio video equipment framework agreement. So we have a lot of things there. And yet, the size of this list should already give you an indication that things are not really the way that they ought to be. It's a bit much. And then in addition, we're going to get WebRTC. So one question that will immediately pop up is, if you have all this stuff, and mind you, we are mostly customer funded, so the customers will actually pay for most of what is here. And then you're going to walk up to them and say, well, we want to do something else. So obviously that doesn't really work. What is WebRTC? Very basically said, it's going to be audio video capabilities directly into your browser without any plugins. It's an open standards effort, partly done by the IETF, partly done by W3C. And what it gives to web developers is a JavaScript API, standardized, that you can tickle, and then all of a sudden you have audio video capability in your web application. So that I believe this is going to be a game changer. It'll support peer-to-peer and star. So I'm actually going to get back to that. In with this, you get the free security, default encryption, and you get a data channel for screen sharing or application sharing. And you get the nice mandatory to implement audio codec, which is a lot better than the stuff that you get by default today. So what that gives you is that every browser becomes a high quality VC endpoint. I'm mixing up 3 languages in my head right now. That's not good. Video conferencing, that's what we're talking about here. That also means that you level the playing field. So having high quality audio video conferencing capability as such is no longer a competitive advantage for anyone, because it's a lot easier to get. However, I mentioned peer-to-peer star. The only thing it does is this little bit here and the interfacing to the user. It doesn't do anything here. For that you would still need ZIP or XMPP or something else, or agree to be at the same place at the same time. So it doesn't solve anything. This will not be a drop-in replacement for unified communication. No rip and replace for Adobe Connect, but it's a pretty crucial brick. Now, what should it give us? At the very least, this should give us a lot less friction in the user experience. This makes it easier for users to actually switch this stuff on. No more download plugin, oh dear, the admin settings were a bit different than what we expected. That should go away. And the easiest way to apply that is obviously for existing scenarios and use cases. Have a new Adobe Connect if you wish. We should see audio video conference capabilities in a lot more services, and one that quickly comes to mind ought to be anything that is customer facing. So my current bank has an option to do a video conference with a client handler, and those types of things presumably become a lot easier, because it will simply be easier to implement this in your web applications. This ought to trigger a change in room systems. Now, yesterday we had a gentleman from Google there, and he said that they do all their stuff with the Chromebox. So you take apart this whole vertical that the Ciscos of this world are selling you, and you replace it with chunks that you can exchange more as you like. It becomes easier to do instant communication. At the moment, you still have to have the application there or the plugin ready or whatever, and right now you can just do it. Because this is in the web browser, that means that you're using the great interwebs for your application deployment. So that means any change that you make in any application that uses WebRTC, that deployment happens in minutes rather than years, at least seen from the user's point of view. You don't have to do any rollouts. And if any of you have had contact with people or experienced yourself with deploying, for example, the Link web client part of Office 365 to students, you would know that this is actually quite worth your while. So what we get is this powerful tool for peer-to-peer communication that already 1 billion users have access to, because this stuff is already built into Firefox and Chrome production releases, and there are indications that hopefully Microsoft will follow. Apple, as usual, doesn't say anything, but we've seen with other developments like this that they tend to follow. Further down the road, we might see decomposed services. This is one bit that makes it easier to replace the monolith that the current LMS systems are with component-based services. And if you want to procure modular services, that's a lot easier than procuring big monoliths. So this should make our life easier in many respects. Something that I really believe in is that second part there. So we could create a video conferencing context that actually adapts to what you are doing. Currently, it's the other way around. You want to do a video conference, you adapt to what Cisco thinks that should look like. And that is not the way it ought to be. if you have a niche research collaboration going on with a web-based interface to your database and whatever, you want to be talking in that context, not take that conversation out of context. And the same goes for most of the applications that support e-learning. This technology should give us that, but it requires some other bits and pieces to fall in place as well. What we should really see in time is a change in the RTC market. And that depends on what you believe, whether that's going to happen or not. I think WebRTC is going to be a disruptive technology, and research shows that when a technology is disruptive, most of the incumbents will die. And that's not because they don't see it coming, but it's because they just can't act on it. Recently, Kodak fell over, and they invented the digital camera. Go figure. Someone yesterday, and that was that was the guy who runs Appearin, one of the services that I will show a bit about. He said this is making things easy that previously were hard. And that means that they now have the opportunity to look at other things, like creating a very smooth user interface. So you would assume that that would be the competitive advantage of the future, something that users find intuitive in the context in which they need to use it. Our Google representative said, well, it's up to your imagination how you're going to use that. So, some examples. Well, this is not immediately an example, but this is an example of things that are happening that will help the transition to WebRTC. So this is Tromsø Uni. They did some calculations. They have a new building, and they wanted to do distance bridging technology in those rooms. And traditionally, that would set them back something like 50,000 euros, and they didn't like that price number. So they invested some time in figuring out, now that we have USB cameras, is there one that we can use? Can we build a PC-based system that does this? The little additional bit of information you ought to have is that they have just deployed Microsoft Link over the entire campus. So from their point of view, it made a lot of sense having a room-based system that runs on Link. So they did this, they figured it out, and they told me that the additional cost to a room to do this is about 60,000 kroner. So that runs to, what would that be, 7,500 euros, something close to that. The other thing to note is that they also said, look, these rooms and the basic setup of them is not going to be reconsidered for the next 6 years. So that gives you an indication that if you want to change something in the entire sector, then you need to plug into their investment cycles. And at some point, you as an NRA need to convince all these organizations that some other way is the way to go. What they've done here neatly enables a WebRTC deployment, whenever that is going to come. A trick we could do, and we're not sure whether this is a good idea, so we're going to look into this. I mentioned WebRTC does peer-to-peer, and it does traditional star. You could try and combine them. If the majority of your conversations can be done by peer-to-peer, that means that you could service them with nearly zero central componentry, and it's there where you have your cost. Serving up a web application is trivial. You need some stuff to get around that, but it's not that much. And then once a client pops up that is either one for many or it has crappy bandwidth, you could hook them into a server. That gives you a cost advantage. But we don't know if that matters, because most, at least Nordic NRENs, will have access to an elastic infrastructure as a service that might already take care of that aspect. What an IaaS is never going to fix is the advantage in delay that you would have in peer-to-peer. Because one would hope that this would actually be a shorter path, time-wise, than if it takes a little round trip through a central server. But we can play with concepts like this, and that's going to be quite interesting. This is the Appearin service. This is me talking to me. That was not that interesting. So, and given that Tim actually did a live demo, I might as well do it as well. This is your queue as well. And presto, we have a conference call. And this, right, this looks a bit better. So this took 0 time to set up, and this is what you would really like. Now, with the current state of technology, and that's what my colleague Stefan Otto over there figured out, is, well, that's all nice, but there is no dynamic session control at all. So if you have 2 persons, this works out. If you have 3 to 4 persons, then it's a matter of luck that everyone hits the same type of parameters. We've been using this for collaborating with the French research network because they're not allowed to use Skype, and it works remarkably well. This is a Norwegian company, spin-off from Telenor, and they developed the basics in something like 3 weeks with 3 students, and since then they've been tweaking it. They're really focusing on creating a user interface that works. And all the other bits and pieces are already in place because of the protocol. When they had that, they helped the Norwegian Red Cross to build this, which is the Norwegian Red Cross's digital homework assistance service. So that's manned by volunteer teachers, and when I took the screenshot, it was closed. It opens between, I think, 5 and 9. So teachers volunteer, they show up in the list here. You can click on that, and if you have WebRTC, then you have a one-on-one conversation. So the Red Cross actually chose WebRTC, despite the fact that the standard is not entirely done and browser support is not 100% yet. Other example, Amazon's Kindle with the Mayday button. You click on the Mayday button, and you get a WebRTC connection, and because of the data channel, the Amazon employee can see what happens on your screen but can't see you. And you can have a support call. So this is your typical support center support. This one, I find one of the more interesting ones. This is called Codacium, and they've designed a tool for the specific use case of hiring web developers. So here you can live enter JavaScript in a shared editor. You click on run, it runs, you see the output of the run here. Using WebRTC, you can see whom you're interviewing. And presumably you can have multiple video windows there. Now we actually tested that. You can. And so it's quite easy to imagine that this wouldn't be this particular tool, but that this would be a tutoring application where you would have a teacher and a student, where you would have whatever assignment the student handed in with the annotations of the teacher. You would have a little notepad here, and you would record the whole session, because research shows that if you do that, tutoring sessions become a lot more effective. So here you can clearly see what you could achieve because of this capability. Now, what has happened in the last couple of years is not only things like WebRTC. We might not notice it, but quite some stuff actually does progress. So we've had USB for a while, which has helped a lot for things like cameras and headsets and the like. So that made that part a lot easier. We've now had HDMI for a while, and it's been around long enough so that the basic bugs have been fixed and a lot of cheap equipment is available. Mr. Moore still does his job, so the CPU power that we do get on no size whatsoever is still increasing, including a system on chip. This little thingy here is a development of a community that sprung up some 2 years ago. They're now building Android systems on stick. So this is a USB stick format device that has enough compute power to at least display HD, and it has an HDMI port. You stick it in a screen, you add Bluetooth keyboard, and then you launch a WebRTC application if you have camera and mic attached. It doesn't entirely work, and this one will never work because the Trondheim company that built it has now gone bust. But they're still working on this concept. Remember the iPad that is now quite natural? It was only launched something like 4 years ago. And now we're getting WebRTC. So a lot of different technology trends are actually neatly coming together to support easier video conferencing. Deployment progresses as well. So nowadays everyone has a smartphone. That's the standard. If you don't have it, then that's weird. Bandwidth has reached, well, at least in Norway. I don't know how this is in the UK. And considering that we get -20 and still use the smartphone, that's quite... bandwidth, I remember this was a big debate something like 15 years ago, but it isn't anymore. I can't even remember what I have at home, but I think it is 100 down, probably. It's enough so my kids don't worry about it, and I can still do stuff. Technology at the institutions also change, and that has an impact on what you could do with a new development like WebRTC. They're kicking out their PABXs. They're investing hugely in unified communication. Again, this is in Norway. I have anecdotal conversational evidence that the same thing happens in Sweden, but I don't have the context to support that. But I'm thinking, once that has happened, they're not going to make a huge investment again in something different, not for the coming years. So whatever you do with WebRTC, it has to complement what they already have, or it has to support that. And at the same time, the core business of the institutions is changing. MOOCs are coming, net-based teaching, flipped classroom, all that is changing the way that education is done. Well, and then if you start thinking about deploying WebRTC, you still have to think, are we discussing at the right level? Because there are free tools, still Skype, Google Hangouts. If that does the job, why bother? And is that even the right level? Because maybe you could just get your whole e-learning productivity suite from one provider, including real-time communication. And then why bother with a single component? There are reasons why you would want to do that, but it's still a question that needs to be asked. Yes. So, WebRTC at the moment is very much a moving target. The standards aren't done yet. The ones that are nearly done, they still need to be complemented with some extra functionality that people are working on. Standards are supported by 2 major browsers, not 4. Until that happens, you can't really promote any huge investments yet. But then again, at the same time, we see market is evolving, new companies appear, there is a technology out there that can be used. So I'm figuring we have probably some 2 years that we need to use to position ourselves. Because 2 years from now, questions are going to come from the community, from your community, and you need to have some answers. And if you need to start building up your technical and market knowledge by then, it's a bit too late. You don't know what needs to happen then. Maybe there is a procurement needed, maybe there is a service development needed. The only thing I can tell you is that if that standardization stuff goes ahead, then yeah, you need to know what to do by then. And whatever that answer is, it needs to fit in with what's currently there, because otherwise you will never ever get anything deployed. Synchronizing investments, that takes a lot of time. So I advocate a systematic approach. Look at the stuff that's there, figure out where WebRTC fits in, and then try to figure out what is a good thing to do based on what users want to do with the technology. They want to communicate for a certain reason. They want to achieve something. Preferably taking into account how the pedagogical models are changing and how that influences what the users want to do. At the same time, look at what's available on the technology side and where those two meet. That's where our space is. So, join us in our quest for this roadmap. In Norway, we do have a national activity. There will be a WebRTC task in Jean 4, which starts in April next year, which is going to look at this whole roadmap business and is going to do some trials and will build a simple demonstrator. We are setting up a trainer task force because in this project there's like 2 man-years of effort there. So only a few entrants can participate. That's not enough if you want to have a blueprint that lots of others can follow. So for that we have an open space. There's probably going to be a Nordic activity as well. So if you're interested, contact me, talk to Mr. Peter Segedi there, talk to Misi over there, talk to Stefan over there. Are there any questions?
Yes, there is one from me. If I listen to the WebRTC and where we are going in the future, and then I was thinking of Tim's presentation, how can you see that those can fit together?
What Tim has built is a signaling application. And that's exactly the part that WebRTC is missing. So I don't see a problem there.
Almost the question as much to me as it is to Jan. I think my system is largely required because we're using much more expensive hardware to deliver the same function. And we couldn't right now have launched that system based on WebRTC because, as Jan said, it's probably 2 years until you could realistically do that, although Google have. So I think I'm expecting to be replaced pretty quickly. Best of luck to you. I think it's the question I was going to ask. Can I ask a question? Okay. Right now we're struggling with a lot of different concepts for people having numbers and addresses and different ways of dialing and initiating a call. If anybody can start any type of video service and embed it in a website that's specific to the function of whether you're having your car repaired or buying insurance or interviewing somebody or repairing a bit of code, they're all going to have different ways of launching the video and different ways of identifying people. Are we just going to create an even more fragmented market? Because as far as the users are concerned, they don't know the difference between Movi and Skype. They just know it's yet another thing they've got to think about how they can have a video conference with someone. So the question is, shall we have a video conference? Oh, what have you got? What have you got? That gets worse.
In a way, but I think in any case you would have 2 ways of agreeing where you're going to meet up. And one way is the telephone way. I call you and you get some feedback and then you pick that up, and for that I need to know where you are. The other way, which is what you typically use in Adobe Connect, is you agree somehow out of band on a place where you're going to meet. And in the context of, say, your car mechanic site, that would be the car mechanic site, which is the natural context where you would have that conversation. So I don't think it necessarily means that things are going to be more complicated, but I think we will have more variety in how you can do that. But the I want to speak to you now bit, that signaling, I think that's a different, well, it's a rather annoying problem as well. I'm very happy that Peter is looking into that.
Do we have further questions or some more questions? Okay. Thank you very much, John. And then the next speaker will be Peter Segedi from Terina. And Peter is a project development officer with Terina. Terina is responsible for the task forces that John mentioned earlier. Peter will be talking about numbering the bones. And how do we solve a little bit of that problem that John and Tim was talking about? How do we find people? Are we going to introduce yet another number that we're going to be known under? Or is there another way of solving that problem? So with that, let's see if we can solve. Yep.
Now it's red. Ah, strange. So, so about the issue of addressing, numbering, and naming. I'm not an identity expert, but I'm sharing the office with 3 identity experts. So imagine me sitting in my office with front of Miss Edurome and Mrs. Edurome, sorry, and Mr. Edugain and Miss Shibboleth Consortium. So I'm trying to, you know, sit there and work on some tangible stuff, and always hearing these buzzwords like SAML, identity, IDP, you know. So I mean, and I thought, you know, probably the issue that I'm trying to solve has something to do with identity. So I started to think about it, and this is basically all kinds of attributes of my identity. So the name, usernames, various numbers. On the other side, basically there are some addresses. So the first column, you can see who I am. So that's about naming or numbering. It depends on the actual identifier that I have. And on the right-hand side, you can find kind of addresses, how to reach me. Okay, so the number or the name, most of the cases translates to an address if you want to reach me. So when I talk about real-time communications, you obviously want to reach me. So that the name or number, which is my identifier, should translate into some kind of address. In most of the cases, the address will translate to another address, and that address will translate to yet another address, because eventually, if we talk about IP communications, it should all boil down to an IP address of my device in the end. So there are many lookup services running around in a way where the system or the end user is trying to identify me. Is this a chance to identify me? So there is a kind of an identity paradox here. If we talk about you know, traditional telephony, when you have a telephone number, PSTN telephone number, E164 number, the user has no real face. There are many corner cases, situations like non-geographic numbers or even mobile numbers. Or I can tell you the classic example that, you know, when I usually order pizza, I use my mobile phone to call the pizza place, you know, and order the pizza, and the pizza is there. In my place in Amsterdam, actually, and once we visited friends in The Hague and put my phone on the table, and we had a good discussion, and we got hungry, so let's order the pizza. And somebody picked up my phone and ordered the pizza, and we were waiting and waiting, and it was like then the pizza guy called me that here is your pizza, and we opened the door. Nobody's there. Where's my pizza? Here in Amsterdam. Oh shit. So you identified me, yeah, based on because they knew my phone number. They thought they identified me. They knew everything about me. Yeah, so there are some tiny glitches here and there. So there is a complex authentication problem and number validation problem, even with PSTN. And even the provider, if the provider, you know, delegates a block of numbers to university, they cannot really identify the end user. They don't know who's going to use that number or each of the numbers of the number block. So it's kind of a paradox here, like, you know, saying I'm lying, which is a circular self-referential statement. You know, it's you don't know whether it's true or false, right? So I'm lying, but I'm stating the truth, so I'm lying. So what? And exactly the same issue here. So I'm the valid end user of this phone number because I selected a provider and the provider identified me as such. This kind of thing is pretty much self-referential. We cannot really get anywhere to this. So the community came up with a solution that seems to be a good solution at that time. To solve this problem, you know, you have the phone number and you have the right to choose your provider, and the provider says this is your phone number, that I can choose my provider, I can choose any other provider if I wish. So you somehow need an external database, okay? And you need processes put in place like registration, validation of the number and aging, and there's a good thing to do that with a simple lookup service, DNS lookup service. It's used by the web community. It's state of the art, you know, DNS lookup. If you have a domain name, look up for the IP address, and you got it. So the community came up with this idea of end user opt-in enum. Enum means number mapping, E164 number mapping to all kinds of addresses. So this idea looked at that time as a brilliant solution, and technically it is. There are some obstacles that this idea actually couldn't get through, and this is at least the public and user initiative is not really progressing anywhere. I'm going to talk about it a little bit later on. So again, all these ways how you can approach me. Last slide, Jan's last slide was he listed his email address, Skype ID, and phone number, but you might list another various pretty much service-centric addresses, and we have this chaos of all kinds of addresses which are mostly service-centric. So what we need is really a user-centric approach. Okay, so we want to move from this address chaos to some kind of address harmony, which is user-centric. Okay, and Enum gives this kind of solution for you. So you have your own, Enum number, and you can organize all the various ways, and other identifiers or addresses or names around this. And this should be somehow decoupled or separated from the underlying transport technology. And we do not really talk very much about these. We talk a lot about infrastructure and protocols and protocol gateways. Basically, where the really scattered picture is around these service-centric addresses. So we need a solution for this. An argument against numbers. Okay, so you can also argue why do we really need numbers? Yeah, I mean there are all kinds of better identifiers, so it's CPURIs or others. But to be honest, telephone numbers are global, uniform, and standardized resource identifiers, and actually all phone numbers are known by the network, known by the systems, right? So that's why you can easily just pick up a phone, dial a number, and reach out to the other end. So in contrast with CPURI, for instance, it's always kind of an opt-in, user-driven registration system where you have to populate DNS records and DNS system, and only those URIs known by the system that are interconnected in one way or another, or federated, if you like, and this information is exchanged with a global hub. So that's why actually it's one of the reasons. It's not me who's saying that. Actually, it's written in an expert paper. That's why they analyze this issue, and that's why many IP calls still route via the telco network and the PSTN networks. That's the only bridge where they can basically bridge this gap that I don't really know the other end. You have a PSTN gateway somewhere. Let's drop to PSTN, and the PSTN system, because it's a globally unified numbering addressing system, might be able to identify the other end, and then again the PSTN gateway drops you back to that domain, and well, so it's not really an IP to IP call all the way. So yeah, so and the statement, which was the original statement behind the global golden enum tree of the RIPE NCC and the RIPE enum working group, saying that we should simply complete the enum. We should have all the PSTN numbers converted into an enum number with other type of addresses, mostly CPURIs, of course. They're talking about voice over IP, attached to stitched together. And once enum is completed, then we can solve this issue. So we'll see how it flies, or how it goes. So what enum does, just quickly, I already mentioned, it's basically it's a PSTN E164 number mapping. It's a protocol, it's a standard protocol. So if you have a number, it creates kind of a domain name. So you can do a state-of-the-art DNS lookup for that domain name, which is the reverse order of the number, and you will get back all the addresses as an answer to your request. The basic principles behind it, okay, so it does not affect any application level functions, so you can put it on top of PSTN or whatever technology under. It can be or might be used to discover resources associated with a phone number. So that's what basically it does, but it does not change the right of use and the basic principles of the phone number. So basically it rides on top of the current regulations and existing phone number. I think that might be an issue in the longer term, but currently it seems to be probably the only approach. So how it works quickly, you dial the number, gets the, if it's voice over IP SIP, it gets the SIP proxy. The proxy does you the DNS lookup, so it gets back to the SIP URI, and then you can forward the call via the SIP infrastructure. There might be other lookups, technology lookups here, of course. For the SIP URI, you have to look up for an IP address and so on. It is just the highest level. Okay, so this is an addressing layer. I'm not talking about the underlying technology. The beauty of the things that, if you do not really have a SIP server, the SIP server is kind of an outsourced part of a third-party service or something. You don't really have to convince, level 3, if level 3 provides you a kind of a hosted PBX service to do this DNS lookup. Even your end device, in some cases, if it's an IP phone, you can implement enum lookup there. So you dial the number and the phone itself looks up and comes back to the SIP URI if that's what you need. I mean, at some time I demonstrated this on my phone. So you can download a small app to your phone. So if you dial a number, your phone does an enum lookup and gets back to H323 or SIP URI or various addresses that I can click on. So if I'm on Edgerome, I can just call them using the soft client of my phone. So I do not really use the mobile network. What I'm using is Wi-Fi and all the way down the NREN network. So so what is this all for? That's an obvious question. Okay, so we came up with a couple of answers there together with the SIP and video conferencing experts of our community, and we asked them to rate the answers. What do you think as an NREN VC or voice over IP service manager? What is this whole enum thing should be useful? And answer A was, it's got the highest ranking, which means that basically it's quite easy to just dial a number on a device which has only a numerical keypad. Typically your desk phone or something, which has just a numerical keypad. So you can just dial a number and think. All right, so for the moment, let's try and skip that, which is not really a technical argument, I would say. But all the other fours, which got some almost the same level of ranking, I do believe are valid and technical arguments. So it could be a option B, kind of a lookup service where you look up for SIP URIs, GDS numbers, or any other way of communicating things assigned to a PST number. That's the main use of it, of course. You can use it to direct calls on end-to-end, staying on IP and NREN networks, which basically helps you to spare some money as well if you don't drop your calls to PSTN right away, or even you don't have to peer with a commercial network somewhere and probably pay for the peer-to-peer traffic volume. So that's the other thing. The third thing is direct peering. You can always do, of course, direct SIP peering with other domains if you wish, but it doesn't really scale. And the last one is a kind of creating a universal way of arranging reachability information in a structured and verified way. So these all three are or four arguments are quite valid. So the first one, again, this is about address harmony. Okay, so we have one single enum number which is identified and unifiedly dialable, and even it can fall back to PSTN in any case if you don't if the system eventually cannot really terminate this call, it can always fall back to PSTN. It must be service agnostic. You can use it for service delivery, some cost savings if you terminate or if you route your calls end to end on the NREN network. Scalability, I already told you about that. Add a little bit of risk here. It's a public DNS service, so all DNS type of DDoS attacks and everything. We are vulnerable. We are actually advocating to use DNSSEC and all kinds of best practices. And the user identity, okay? So with the process of registration, validation, and repeat it when it's aging out, then you can easily maintain the thing. So I'd like to get back to the first answer, which got the highest ranking, so you can dial everywhere using a numeric dial pad. This is actually a very good argument if you want to promote this or market or communicate this, because it's a language, alphabet, device agnostic if you wish. So if you know numbers, then you can just dial wherever you are. Depending, if it's a strange alphabet that the country is using, then it's not a problem. And also, you should, when you talk about this, you should avoid any technical aspects of it, because it is a quite complex, as I said in the beginning, problem space. So there's a chance that people might not understand this. So and of course, if it takes a business model, that's very difficult to justify any types of business model behind this. Basically, once you populated your numbers in this enum database or enrenum.database, it means there's others can call you, okay? So it doesn't really affect your calls, right? You're just calling out. But others will be able to call you via enum because you're publishing your enum reachability, which means that the calls will be cheaper for the other end, not for you. But that's why probably it should be a community effort, and especially when we are talking about research education community. So the more number you populate, the more chance that you can call the others via IP networks, via NREN networks, all the way and reduce your costs. Okay, so this is a little bit of a communication approach here. So what we are doing, we took this original enum service idea and we implemented this especially tailored for academia and research education community. So we have this NREN enum service. NRenum service. We play the word a little bit. The bottom line is that it's operated and governed by the NRENs as a community. So we run the tier 0, the top level DNS, and we look after the country code registrations and everything. And then the NRENs should act as a national registry and registrar on the other end and take care of the number registrations. Okay. A little bit of history. We have logo and trademark and everything. We started more or less in parallel with the golden enum tree efforts of RIPE and CC, and at that time we said that perhaps when the golden enum tree will be complete, we will migrate over to the golden tree. Doesn't really fly. The golden tree is dead. Nothing is happening there, mostly because of some policy issues and the reluctance of telcos and other public providers to publish this kind of reachability in a DNS system. So basically there is no golden enum tree, but our tree works because it is working for and in this research education community. We even went global, so we have a global governance committee at the moment on the top. We have a couple of operators there, the technical guys. We have DNS, it's top level DNS distribution, a 4 DNSs in Europe, other 4 in the US, with 2 other DNSs in Australia, so it's a quite robust distributed DNS system. At the top level, we have 36 country codes delegated at the moment. The darker the color, you cannot really see the gray ones. So the darker the color, the more the number, which is actually delegated to the service. If you want to take a look at this live, we have this crawler, DNS crawler application that crawls the enum tree up and down in a random way and collects the actual numbers, the number of enum records in the tree. So you can see that the usage probably starts where you reach 1,000 number or something, I would say. And these guys, the Brazilians, North Americans, Australians joined recently, and they climbed up pretty high in the list. And those were probably the initiators or the originals in the service. We're trying to convince others as well to join. So this list is longer actually. If you take a look at the crawler, the enrenum.net page, you will see the real numbers there. This whole idea and the kind of global agreement on top of this enum population is sort of supported by all the major real-time communication activities around the globe, I would say, including NetPlus, Internet to NetPlus Video Exchange Service, the Global Video Alliance, and the real-time communication group of the CEO Forum staff, and also the EduComGian staff, Tim Bundy's work. How to participate, obvious question. If you want your country code delegate, so what we operate is the top level DNS, okay? So we delegate country codes to the top level. You should contact me, take a look at the website. We have all these procedures described on the website. Download the form, delegate your stuff. We basically look after all the regions. We have some agreements with NordUnet. So if you are from the Nordic country, NordUnet will look after for the number delegations and a DNS sub-delegation. Talk to Eric Kickenborg. North America, Internet 2 does it. It's kind of a numbering anomaly anyway with the +1, because +1 is not just the US but many other countries on the +1. So we delegated the whole +1 at once, and we delegated also the responsibility and obligation for Internet to look after this. So for Canada and for other 20 countries in in Jamaica and the others, we'll talk to them. And in Latin America, we are releasing with Red Clara to do the same for the Latin American countries, although we delegate country codes one by one all the time. So I would be delighted to tell you our best practices. Cool. We don't really have best practices. We got to the stage where we managed to identify some bad practices. Okay, so this is what you should not do, all right? So the usual issue, what you do, get delegated and do nothing. It doesn't work like that. So that's the longer tail on the list if you check the crawlers. So those are all the NRANs who managed to the stage where they understood the issue, they understood the importance of it, they got delegated a country code, and then they did nothing. So you should do other things like set up a national policy for your number registration, sub-delegate your DNS to your universities or whatever, or run a kind of a support service at the national level where people can register, and system managers can register numbers. Another bad practice is using virtual numbers. We do not really like them because we want to make sure that we can always be in line with the PSTN system and ensure PSTN fallback. Sometimes it's inevitable, so we have some solutions for that I can talk about, or I can answer questions if you're interested in that. Basically what we try to do, most of the cases the NRANs are using sandboxes, so identify those kind of area codes which are not used by the PSTN system, and they put numbers there or start to populate numbers there which are not real or not valid E164 numbers, okay, because they are in a kind of a sandbox. It's a quite dangerous and risky approach, so we try to chase them away from this to try and solve your regulator, talk to your telco, try and agree on this use of these numbers, and reach out some solution. Third bad practice is wildcarding numbers. We also hate that. So if if you're lazy, you can basically wildcard. You can put an X asterisk somewhere, and you can easily delegate complete number blocks to the system. We don't really like that. The crawler doesn't like that, and doesn't solve the identity issue either. So please do not do that. Try and invest time and efforts into to delegate these numbers, even with a script, but one by one, all the numbers. Just quickly, the to-do list for regulators and telco providers. Do SIP, do enum, support enum. Enum lookups everything. For the web community, solve this addressing chaos, which is happening in the identity space with single sign and all kind of stuff. Facilitate enum for application-specific addressing. NRANs also for the NRANs community to solve the identity paradox that I just started with. This one is not going to fly. Okay, so we tried many times. That's why the golden enum tree doesn't work. But at least we have some space here to move in and do some stuff. My very last slide is about a new approach. Just recently there was this FCC call in the US about all IP communications and numbering testbeds. So interesting point is that not just the transport and the protocol bits, but the addressing and the numbering issue was addressed by this call. We are talking to a couple of companies to team up and do some work, and the interesting bit is there that the telcos are still hesitant to change anything, move away from signaling and the good old SS7 stuff, but the web world, the Googles and Facebooks of this world is really excited about it to do something, greenfield, enum federation based new idea to solve this numbering paradox. Okay, so that's the current activity. This is what's happening, and this is my real last slide. Slowly, I just wanted to advertise the new Giant4 project. It was already mentioned by Jan and Tim. So we will have 3 tasks there. First one is about educonf, legacy SIP, H323 if you wish, and renum.net promotion in the first task. Second one will be WebRTC, roadmap for NRANs, some kind of demonstrator, if we can come up with something, as Jan presented things. And the third one is open educational resource and all the relations with the new education wave, their metadata aggregation, and how WebRTC can support either both, or how these things can come together. It's a very good window of opportunity now to really talk together, get together under one single service activity Ocean for at least for 1 year, the first year Ocean, and see what we can really agree on and achieve together. So this was my final word. And I take any questions if you wish.
Good. Questions, comments?
Not an easy topic. We do not really talk about a lot about this type of addressing issue. We always focus on the protocol and the infrastructure a bit, which is a good thing. But I do believe that we really have a potential here. I mean, the NREN community have the potential here to move into this space, because that's what the commercials want to solve. They will build up their walled gardens. They want to protect their business. They want to protect your users. If I start a WebRTC, startup company, I'll protect my users. If Jan starts another one, I'm pretty sure I won't be in a position to give out my users and user access to my WebRTC-based service, because that's my service, right? I want to keep my users. I want to take my users' identity. I don't want to do that. So it's kind of an obstacle in front of the unified global collaboration. I think NRENs have a chance to solve this.
Okay, so then we'll don't pull the plug yet.
Don't pull.
Do not pull the plug.
Which plug? You mean?
The computer. Yeah. So then we will round up this session. I would like to remind you all that there is the opening reception that will be 1 stairs up on the first floor on the opposite side of the big hall. And I'll see you all tomorrow morning at 9 o'clock here. So thank you very much, Peter.
Thank you.